Good evening and welcome to the 2017 Public Lecture Series on the Wisconsin Idea, Past and Present. This lecture series is part of a course being taught under the auspices of the Department of Sociology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I'm Eric Sandgren, a professor at the School of Veterinary Medicine, and I have the honor to serve as the instructor for this course this semester. Students taking this for credit, please sign in. The Wisconsin Idea has always been about more than training students for the workforce. It meant, as Adlai Stevenson once put it, a faith in the application of intelligence and reason to the problems of society. The aspiration to light the way of Wisconsin citizens and government with the best torches of knowledge and understanding that their university can generate. Accordingly, this lecture series and the course with which it is associated aim to bring students, staff, and faculty in the UW system into a broad conversation with the citizens of the state about how the knowledge produced at the University of Wisconsin has benefited the public in the past and continues to do so today. I encourage you to participate actively through our course website at www.wiscidea.com. If you'd like to contribute to this project, please consider making a contribution to the Wisconsin Idea Course UW Foundation Fund. You can do so through the course website. We are fortunate to continue our series tonight with a lecture by Nigel Cook speaking on giving cows the spa treatment. How do we balance animal welfare with economic realities on the dairy? Dr. Cook is a professor in the Food Animal Production Medicine section at the University of Wisconsin-Madison School of Veterinary Medicine. After qualifying as a veterinarian in 1992, he worked in a large food animal clinic in southern England for 4 years before moving to the Royal Veterinary College, Hertfordshire, where he spent 3 years as lecturer and head of the large animal ambulatory clinic. Since 1999, he has been in Wisconsin working with students, working with veterinary students, teaching them, performing research, and developing outreach to improve dairy cattle well-being. His particular interests include lameness prevention, cow comfort, and improving facility design. He developed the Dairyland Initiative, a resource to drive the creation of welfare-friendly cattle housing in 2010. He is currently chair of the Department of Medical Sciences at the School of Veterinary Medicine and past president of the American Association of Bovine Practitioners. Like all of our speakers, Dr. Cook is graciously donating his time and expertise free of charge out of a commitment to public service. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Nigel Cook.
Thank you much. Appreciate you spending this chilly evening with me to talk about cows for a little bit. I think I get to come to this auditorium about every 3 years or so and deliver some perspective on my life and the work that we do. I appreciate the opportunity to do that this evening. I'm 25 years a veterinarian this year, so we had a reunion, and I'm starting to get a little more gray hair and a little thinner on top. So these opportunities to look back are coming perhaps ever more frequently, but they're fun to do so. So I'm going to show you a little bit about our what we think of the Wisconsin Idea and how we deal with the dairy industry. I get to work in a truly unique environment. I'm lucky to do that. This is what I call my hood. These are the people that we work with every day. They're, I think, an amazing group of folks that work on dairy farms. We have an exceptional dairy industry in this state, one that I think sometimes gets overlooked, and they're struggling a little bit at the moment. They've had a tough few years, so I do respect and enjoy the fact that I've had this position for 18 years now. I'm going to share with you some thoughts on our education program, how we use that to feed our research and our outreach, share with you some of the partnerships we've built over the years and some of the impact we've been able to have on the dairy industry. So starting with education, there really isn't a school of veterinary medicine on the planet that rivals us in our ability to educate dairy-interested veterinary students. We have a variety of unique opportunities, both based on educating people to treat the individual animal in our hospital, but also to go to farms like this and share experiences with caregivers on small and large dairies and learn how to deliver treatments, develop protocols, supervise medicine use. And again, I think it is completely unrivaled. As is our ability to work with the industry. We have in Baraboo, Wisconsin, one of the finest hoof trimming training schools in the globe as well. Dairyland Hoof Care, run by a Swiss gentleman called Carl Berge, that I've developed really a long-term relationship with over the years. Passionate about teaching, and these are our veterinary students learning how to treat lame cows on a commercial dairy farm. These are not fake cows, these are real cows. These are sharp knives and grinding tools that all of our veterinary students, if they choose to do so, can learn how to trim cows' feet and to do so exceptionally well, and I think it's an amazing gift. Our interests expand beyond the individual. They look at how we treat the herd, and with that comes some skills that we require to analyze the stall environment that the cow lives in, the ventilation systems. This is Tim Keller, one of our dairymen down in Mount Horeb, Wisconsin. We go there twice a year with our students. They learn how to tear apart his calf barn ventilation system and assess it, and they are, again, a great partner with us in our education program. We were just recently able to get about a $250,000 grant from USDA that enables veterinary students from other schools to come and be trained within our program. So this is another, I think, great opportunity to be able to preach the Wisconsin idea, if you like, to give those students an opportunity to join us, but also it tends to elevate the performance of our own students when they have folks, and we have a class going on right now with students from Western, from Louisiana, from California, and it's really a great coming together of different ideas. Finding solutions to the problems facing the dairy industry, supporting the veterinary profession, and at the same time teaching the next generation of veterinary practitioners is a unique opportunity that we have, that I've been blessed to be part of these last 18 years. But it's perhaps timely just to take a little bit of a peek at what's happening with our dairy industry, because it is changing, continues to do so for a variety of different reasons. We're losing herds. The number of our dairy herds, as you drive around, you'll realize that, has been declining over the years, and this is data since '92. It's notable since about 2005, the rate of decline in the number has decreased a little bit, as we've seen. With that decline in the number of herds is an increase in the size of the herds. And that has also accelerated over recent years. As we see the number of smaller dairies decrease, we see larger and larger farms being constructed, which elevates our average herd size. Indeed, most of the herds that we deal with our program would average around 600 cows, and our average herd size in the state is now approaching 160 or 180 cows, something like that. And with that consolidation, we also see this rise in milk production, which is constant, continues year in, year out, and has in Wisconsin accelerated again in recent years. And hopefully we can perhaps claim to be part of that process of learning how to manage cows in these larger dairies, doing a better job, and seeing the cows perform in a better fashion. Why these macro trends? Economies of scale, efficiencies, all of these things really result in the trends that you see not only in Wisconsin but globally. Cows are living in larger herds in pretty much every country that you visit. When we compare our sustainability, our carbon footprint, if you like, between 1944, predominantly a grazing pastoral type industry with smaller herds, with the modern, more confinement house dairy, we see an efficiency here that is quite remarkable in terms of CO2 equivalents per kilo or pound of milk. We operate at about 1/3 compared to where we used to be in 1944. That's a dramatic improvement in efficiency, driven predominantly by increased production per animal, the maintenance cost of that animal diluted over greater production. So with that backdrop, the training of our students, the visiting of farms, the changing of the industry, though that situation drives our research program. And we predominantly have not chased the next government grant. We've basically worked with our industry to try to answer the questions that we've been confronted by. Because when you visit a farm, we're often asked, why is my performance limited? What is the limiting factor here, and what can we do to solve that? And on certain farms, it can be the breeding and the genetics of the animal. We can certainly look at genetics to enhance production. We're actually focusing more on type and health traits and longevity in our genetic selections, but with the advent of genomics, genetic selection continues at a very rapid rate. For the most part, in our industry, genetics haven't been a major limiting factor to performance. It's a continual improvement year after year. It could be the feeds. Feeds and feeding has certainly been an issue. I've just come back from Europe, and certainly some of the feeds that they have to feed dairy cattle, very wet grass silages compared to the corn silage, the alfalfas, the soybeans, the cotton seeds, the high moisture shell coins that we get to feed over here compared to some of the feeds that are fed to cattle elsewhere. Those in themselves drive high performance, and our animal science groups, nutritionists have improved the feeding of cattle to the point, again, with the availability of great consultants and modern technology, feeds have ceased to become a major limiting factor. They may be from time to time when we make some bad forage, but overall our farmers are looking elsewhere for limiting factors. And they may relate to the management of the cow, the breeding management, the management of the transition cow, and we've certainly worked in areas where that has been a limiting factor. But predominantly over the last 10 to 15 years, what's held our industry back has been a lack of knowledge of how to build the facility that we house our dairy cattle in. And that's really been our focus. A lot of our investigations turn into, why doesn't this facility work? And trying to find a solution to that. And that's really why you sit here listening to a veterinarian talking about buildings, which all seems rather odd and a far cry from where I thought I'd be 18, 25 years ago. Dairy cows have transitioned in the state. Again, as you drive around, you'll realize that there are fewer cows living in little tie stall barns and more cows living in these larger facilities. We call them freestall facilities. Cows are free to move around a pen, eat at a feed bunk, socialize in an alleyway, or lie down in a freestall. Those cows can come and go as they please. They're milked in a parlor. And a lot of our larger herds, again, around the world, not just Wisconsin, are housed in this type of facility. Large open sidewalls, high-pitched roofs, and so on. We don't keep a lot of cows at pasture in the US now. Pasture probably accounts for around 8% of the dairies in the US. You'll drive to parts of Europe where pasture grazing systems are far more commonly used. And I think that is linked to a number of different circumstances, largely driven by climate. And we'll come back to that at the end of this talk. So these facilities, when we troubleshoot on-farm problems, lameness, mastitis, fresh cow health and performance, calf health, heat stress, we're frequently coming round to the design of the facility and trying to troubleshoot why did this thing get built this way, and can we do something about it? So for me as a veterinarian, the patient is no longer the individual cow. It's the cows living in a cow barn built here, and the cure is alongside it, because this dairy owner, a good friend of mine, we've learned a lot of things together over the years. He does like to remind me that exactly the same number of cows live in this new barn as live in this old barn here. And that's reflective of the growth of our knowledge and our experience and of what cows need in these facilities. So to return to a passion of mine, lameness, if we look at the peer-reviewed literature around the world, 23% of our cows walk with a limp. And that isn't a particularly satisfying situation to be in. This is a severely lame cow down here. This is a more moderately milder lameness. But all these cows have a painful lesion in their foot that alters their gait. They show weight change. And again, a situation globally where 23% of the cows are lame is intolerable for our dairy industry, and something that we've really had to do something about, and something that I can share with you that we are doing something about. Nothing more distressing, frankly, than seeing a beaten up lame cow with an extremely sore, painful foot she can barely able to bear weight on, and something that consumers, obviously, when they're confronted with this animal, share concerns for the animal welfare and what we're doing to the cows on our farms. We certainly associated with some pretty high levels of lameness back when I first came here in the early 2000s, but also saw some benefits. And in both our tie stalls and our free stalls, we saw some reductions in lameness associated with cows bedded on sand, rather than what was becoming far more common at that time, a rubber crumb filled mattress type product that initially looked to be the savior of everything, that we could use a mattress instead of having to buy bedding and all these different things. The cows could lie in a comfortable mattress. Well, when we looked at lameness, there seemed to be an issue with that we weren't seeing cow performance related to the use of that product. So I want to talk a little bit about life on a beach, because what we've realized is that the best bed for a cow is a deep bed of sand. And the wonderful things that sand can give, we all kind of like life on a beach, like lying on a beach. Sand does get everywhere though, so there are some challenges with managing that type of bedding. But what are the advantages? Well, let's go back to that grazing cow and just think about her time budget and what she spends time doing in her day. The grazing cow's time budget is dominated by two things. There's this big one here, 8 hours of eating. It takes a lot of time and energy and work to convert grass into nutrients, and the cows have to spend 8 hours a day grazing, taking those nutrients on board so that they can generate milk. By the time they're milked and they've transferred to and from the milking center, they're left with about 10 hours a day to lie down. So when you drive past a grazing herd, you'll see cows pretty busy, either eating or resting out on pasture. So 10 hours, or actually a little bit less, fairly common within our grazing industry. That's not the case when we bring our cows indoors. When we house cows in these freestall structures, we predominantly feed them what we call a total mixed ration. And that's a ration where we chop up all the forages and the concentrates and we mix it together, and it creates a very efficient way for that cow to be able to absorb nutrients and to ingest, not in 8 hours a day, but now 4.5 hours a day. So eating time goes from 8 to 4.5. And we absolutely have to take some of those saved hours and put them into lying. Because when a cow lives indoors, we believe they have to lie down for half the day. 12 hours of rest. I'd love 12 hours of rest. I average about 6.5. 12 is a dream. But that's what a hard-working dairy cow. And let's remind ourselves, a dairy cow's metabolic rate would rival a human doing the Tour de France every day. So these animals work incredibly hard and they deserve some rest time. And that's what we have to do when we build these facilities. We have to get cows to 12 hours of rest. They spend a little time socializing and drinking in the alleys, about 3 hours of milking, about 2 hours using the stall predominantly standing. But that's our goal. That's what we set out to do. When we look at cows' behavior on sand versus these mattress products, the biggest thing we see is this bout duration. When they lie down, they stay lying for longer on this soft bed of sand. We call that the Tempurpedic Effect. My wife and I are looking for a new mattress, and we've been testing mattresses. The Tempurpedic is one I think that I can get my 12 hours of rest on. You see here about 20 minutes longer per bout for the sand-bedded cows compared to the mattress cows, which means that if we try to rest for 12 hours a day, and we firmly believe cows are trying to do that, that you take fewer bouts with fewer longer bouts, so that cow has to get up and down fewer times, compared to a firmer surface where the bouts are shorter and that cow must get up and down more frequently and more times per day. So what, I hear you cry. Fascinating science, but is there a point, Dr. Cook, to all this nonsense? Well, not really. There's not much of a point for a small, young, fit cow that's able to get up and down. But I tell you, it's a huge deal for a bigger, older cow, especially a cow with a sore foot, especially a lame cow. Getting her, asking her to get up and down more frequently is an enormous challenge to those cows. And that's the gift of sand. Not only do we get longer bouts, longer, more comfortable resting bouts, but we ask the cow to get up and down less frequently. And it's the getting up and down that they have trouble with. If you look at this cow getting up in a deep bed of sand, she's got cushion not only when she's lying down, but cushion, traction and support as she gets up and down. And that facilitates normal resting behavior in these animals and has an enormous benefit when we look at recovery from lameness. The best way to recover from lameness is rest. Get off your feet, allow the tissues of the corium to recover, and that's what we get with this type of bedding. Others have come along since our research and confirmed, thankfully, our perspectives. This is the biggest lying time study ever done, 141 dairies in Canada, across Canada, 40 cows per farm, and they found an average of 11.7 hours of rest on sand. 0.3 hours off our target. If we'd have designed the stalls, they'd have hit it. So close to 12. These other products, we're down around 10 and a half. And in a confinement housed facility, that's simply not enough. That is not enough for our metabolic athletes. They need the opportunity to rest more than that. Our industry in Wisconsin has embraced that research, embraced that knowledge. 60% of our herds are using sand now. Some are experimenting with manure solids and other organic materials. But what those sand herds achieve is a more comfortable cow that produces more milk. About 2,000 pounds more milk per lactation than other types of bedding. Phenomenal improvement in feed conversion efficiency, health, and an animal that has a lower somatic cell count, better udder health, and our farmers reap the rewards of embracing and adopting that approach. This is a cow, hopefully this is going to play. Maybe it's not going to play. This one isn't going to play. Apologies. Not only is the surface important, but how we define that resting space is important. The design of the freestall, the design of these loops, how we demarcate the area that the cow uses, the actual space that cow uses. And again, 15, 18 years ago, we didn't have a clue how big our cows were because we were trying to put them in tiny little stores. Great for pygmy goats, but not so good for large Holstein dairy cows. And this was having, again, a negative impact on performance. So we spent a lot of time coming up with recommendations for the size of the stall relative to the size of the cow, a body weight estimate here. And research again since has shown that those wider, bigger, more comfortable stalls, the cows rest longer in and have a reduced risk of lameness as a result of that. We've worked in other areas as well, and the theme is the spa treatment, so I can't resist talking about the foot bath here. We've got to look after cows' feet in other ways. These are used to as an antibacterial to treat infectious causes of lameness, and so we've completely redesigned foot baths. They were too short and too narrow, too wide before. We made them long and narrow to facilitate improvements in the transfer of the chemical to the cow's foot. Each cow walking through that bath gets at least 2 or 3 foot immersions as she walks through that bath, and that improves the control of those diseases. And you know when you've got a good idea when you basically can't find a farm in Dane County that hasn't changed their foot bath in the last few years. And so this is a collection of farms that have these long, narrow foot baths now, and I think we've completely written the book on that. My colleague Ken Nordland, he's pictured right here along with Tom Bennett, Gary Edsel, Murray Clayton and myself, had a great idea one lunchtime. He came into my office and said, we're going to make a single metric to measure fresh cow health, early lactation performance. And we sat down and we hashed it out, and Ken basically saw this pet project all the way through to a patent. So we hold the US patent for the Transition Cow Index, which is commercialized and sold by our local DHI company, Dairy Herd Improvement company, AgSource. They sell testing services to our dairies and create reports for them. And the Transition Cow Index became a report that our farmers saw, and it's on a number scale and basically reflected how well cows were doing in early lactation, with a view of looking at both health and milk production. And based on our experiences visiting herds and surveying them, we came up with a blueprint for how to manage and house transition cows. We didn't really draw a blueprint. What we did was we just gave farmers a list of things to incorporate in their approaches. And that was enormously successful in creating a variety of different approaches that work for different farmers in different situations. What we asked for was that all the dry cows should be able to eat at the same time. When you delivered fresh feed, we asked for sufficient bunk space for all those cows to mimic what they do at pasture, which is eat at the same time. It's called allelomimetic behavior. Cows like to do the same thing at the same time. When you put fresh feed at a bunk, all the cows come to eat. You need to provide space for them to do that. We thought dry cows didn't have much to do in a day back 15 years ago, and they could just get to the bunk whenever they wanted to. We didn't need to provide all that space. We were wrong. We do. When we don't provide that space, the cows eat less. And if we do that around parturition, that's incredibly important and stressful to the cow. We wanted a deep, loose-bedded stall. Again, we've explained why that is, and stocking densities to make sure that every cow has a place to lie down. Minimizing regrouping stress in the last week before calving, so we didn't want to mix them and regroup them at that critical time, and ensuring that the cows had a nice quiet place to calve with limited disturbance from humans working with them. And that really led to an incredible change in our industry where we started to build barns for dry cows. Dry cows are cows that we don't lactate for about 60 days. It's basically their time off each year. their vacation time, and it's the 60 days prior to calving. And up until this point, up until Transition Cow Index, we really couldn't build a barn just for dry cows. We always had to have some lactating cows in there because the lenders would be looking at equity and so on and saying, you need a few more milk cows to pay this thing off. We were able to show them that if we house transition cows effectively, the milk and the health paid for the building on its own. And that was a remarkable thing to see these brand new facilities as a result of that. This is our own facility at the UW facility in Arlington. These are our PreFresh cows. They all get to live in a socially stable group, 10 cows at a time, for about 30 days prior to calving. They have oodles of bunk space to consume their feed, a straw-bedded pack to lie upon, and we have phenomenal health and performance in early lactation as a result of those changes. Again, driven by my colleague Ken Nordland's interests, we looked at calf pneumonia. We were starting to bring calves into indoor facilities in these individual pens, and we realized that we were putting these animals at risk for pneumonia, not because we couldn't ventilate the barn. We could ventilate the barn really effectively, but the problem was we couldn't ventilate the area between these panels. And what that did was trap highly contaminated air around the calf and put that calf at risk for pneumonia and respiratory disease. So compared to the clean air of the rest of the barn, that was our issue. And that was published and basically led to a change in the way that we constructed these facilities. Rather than big barns, we went with smaller facilities with 1 to 2 rows of pens, and not one large facility that we would potentially have disease outbreaks, but several smaller ones where we could practice all in, all out rearing. And if we had a salmonella outbreak or something like that in this one barn, then we could shut that barn down and it wouldn't spread to the others. In those facilities, Ken developed this positive pressure tube ventilation system, which basically created a fresh air system that not only ventilated the barn, but also moved air in and out of the pens, refreshed that air around the baby calf, and dramatically reduced calf pneumonia risk as a result. And with that, and with the development of automatic feeding systems, we've seen the industry change more to these group rearing systems. These are cows in a group bedded pack, fed automatically through an automatic milk replacer feeding system. But up in the rafters, you'll see not only a winter tube system providing fresh air all year round, but a summer tube system that now provides even more air and allows and helps that calf cool. Not lost on this is the requirement for straw for our baby calves. Again, the industry was starting to put calves on grids, on tenderfoot, low bedding systems, and we absolutely saw a huge problem with that and advocated this deep nest of straw for our calves to be reared on. And what we'd like to see is basically just the ears poking out. That's when you know you've got enough bedding. If you travel to Expo and a number of farms, you'll see these ventilation systems as a result of our work. The New Holland barns at Dairy Expo are all positive pressure ventilation systems which have really been spawned from Ken's work in calf barns, and we've extended them into holding areas, handling areas on farm, and even over the stalls in the cow living space. And that really extended into an interest of mine because it links back to lameness, and that is the concern of heat stress in our dairy cattle. Our summers are somewhat hot. I think this one wasn't maybe too bad, but we've got some hotter summers to deal with. Cows don't deal with heat stress particularly well. They're remarkably cold tolerant, but cows aren't very heat tolerant. They're heat stressed at temperatures that we find as humans quite comfortable. We all want to live in San Diego kind of all around the year. Cows would even be heat stressed in San Diego. And the reason is high-producing cows that can generate maybe 120 pounds of milk per cow per day generate a huge amount of heat. They have a massive fermentation vat that they haul around with them, and they generate a lot of heat. So compared to the cows of yesteryear, those lower producing cows, our modern cows are generating twice as much heat. They're generating 9 times as much heat as you are right now. What the heck are you playing at? So our cows are instantly very susceptible to hot weather, and we need to do something about that. And so in the same way that we created the message that there is a microclimate around a calf in a calf pen, and that was related to pneumonia, we now believe that the cow lying in her free stall also lives in an important microclimate, and we need to do something to manage that microclimate to limit heat stress. If we watch a single cow lying in a stall, and this is a little complicated, but bear with me, these top bars tell you whether she's standing in the stall, and these bottom bars tell you whether she's lying down. So again, this is just following a cow over several hours. And this black line is the body temperature. And what you see is when cows stand up, their body temperature is cool. She loses temperature. Every time she stands, she is able to dissipate heat. Every time she lies down, however, her body temperature goes up about 1 degree Fahrenheit an hour. So she accumulates heat as she rests in that microclimate. And what happens is, as that cow generates that heat, there's like a tipping point, a trigger point that basically tells her to stand up, otherwise she's going to die. In conditions of heat stress, when she's accumulating that heat as she rests, there is a point where she has to stand up. She stands to thermal pant, to allow the air to access a greater surface area, and she cools as she stands. So what we've really realized is that that is a remarkable challenge for a cow, because we can build this comfortable, spacious stall, but under conditions of heat stress, here we have the THI, a temperature humidity index, on a 6-day period in Wisconsin where it got hotter and hotter and hotter. What happened to line time? We started off at, frankly, a not very good 10 hours a day. We weren't at our 12 to start with. But within 6 days, we were at 6 hours a day. We lost 4 hours of rest for a cow that needs 12 hours. She's now at 6. That's why we lose milk, we lose fertility, we have lame cows as a result of this. This is a massive insult to a dairy cow. I can't think of anything more challenging for her than this type of insult. Heat stress is a big deal. And so we've had the opportunity to work with fan manufacturers now to look at fan location, fan design to generate fast-moving air. Because what we want is to put cows in a position where they're lying in fast-moving air. 2 meters per second, 400 feet per minute, 4 to 5 miles an hour. A nice constant stream of cool flowing air. And we were trying to do that before, but we hadn't got the spacing right. We hadn't got the angle right. We didn't know what to measure. Now we've got some standards. We can go in with little devices, little anemometers, and measure airspeed. We can get our farmers to lie down in their own stalls and work out whether the cows are receiving that fast-moving air in that resting environment. And frankly, amazingly enough, when you do that, when you give them that deep bed of sand, that well-designed bed, and that fast-moving air, we have healthy, comfortable cows, not only in the winter, but also in the summer, that stay lying down for longer, that generate that milk because they don't get lame and they don't have health issues. So that's been our research. But I always like to say that the best journal of dairy science publication is pretty useless unless you tell a farmer about it. And so we've really been focused in our shop on developing an outreach vehicle of telling people what we're doing. And we were doing that on a small scale before, and we continue to do that with individual consults. Farmers builders, veterinarians can call us up and we'll head out to a farm. I've got a dairy to visit in northern Minnesota in a few weeks' time to talk about a barn conversion that we're going to do. So we can do these individual consults, and they certainly impact on a one-on-one, but we wanted something a little bit bigger than that. We'd had experiences with some commercial companies. Zimpro has been a long-standing collaborator over the years, building programs that help their staff deliver outreach and deliver educational programs to help people deal with issues. But we wanted our own, and driving back from a meeting, getting frustrated that a chapter in a book still hadn't been published because they were trying to sell the old copies of the book first, I came back and said, to heck with this, we're going to make a website. And at that stage, at that time, this was 2010, we were starting to see the internet on farms, farmers getting much more tech savvy, and we thought this is the way to go. If we have a new idea, a good idea, we can put it on the web tomorrow and get that information out instantly. And so we built the Dairyland Initiative. This is the revised version. We updated it completely about a year and a half ago. It's translated into French. We've got it being translated into Spanish. We've got a housing module, and just recently we just released the Life-Step Lameness module, an educational module. So on that website, we basically put our blueprint, the Wisconsin blueprint, all of the information we can find, the best information we can put together to allow our farmers access to the information they need to make the best decisions. They can still make whatever decision they like. It's still America. But you can't make the decision without access to all the information now. And that's our approach, and that's what we've done. Our educational module is focused on lameness prevention and touches on all of the different aspects involved in that important disease. Our website has over 2,000 active users. These are people that are logging in extremely frequently. I think we're total 6,000 total users. But you can see the different countries that log on to the site, and certainly it's not only just Wisconsin. We've got a lot of states around the U.S. That are using our resources. I just spent the week in Germany last week talking about facility design. There's nobody in Europe that doing what we're doing. They're confronted with the same challenges we are. They're looking for solutions, and the folks from Wisconsin are providing them. We didn't stop there. Website's neat. You can put some information out there. But what we wanted to do was generate a process, a network. And what we have done over the course of about 36 workshops now is train over 750 people to do what we do. They've become our amplifiers. So we put them in small 30, 50 person groups, and we go through planning processes. We give them situations where they can plan a new facility and learn the things that they need to learn to help our dairy producers make better decisions. And Courtney Holbach, who leads our outreach, is our social media person, so we link them all with Twitter and chat rooms and all these kinds of things. But we have a global consultant network, lots of different countries represented, builders, engineers, veterinarians, nutritionists, producers. Locally, we can put you into contact with people that have the information to be able to do what we do. So rather than us dealing with one farm at a time, maybe every other week, fitting it in around teaching and all the other stuff that we're supposed to do, now we have an amplifier network that our producers can get access to, and that we can keep informed of all the new things that are out there. Our recommendations have been taken as a standard for some of the dairy farm manuals. We'll come on to that in a moment. They're obviously on our website, but what we also wanted to do was put things into apps, and so we got into the app business. We do have an app for that. We have been into this for a number of years now. A guy called Tom Bennett works in our shop. We spent $10,000 and sent him to a class to learn how to program in Android and iOS, and he generated all these apps for us. We gave him the ideas. He's the one who puts it all together. So we have, I'm not sure how many we have anymore, but it was all started with an educational innovation grant from UW. We took that on, and now this is a source of income to our program. We feed that back in. Pays for the coffee anyway. Our partnerships are really important to us because when you set out to do stuff that perhaps not everybody's very interested in, it's one thing the producer's saying, this is my problem. It's quite another getting a granting agency interested in that. And so you have to develop a mechanism to get it done. And the mechanism we used was to use commercial companies to say, you know, we're doing some really important work here. Would you like to help us? We generally don't test their products or really do anything to help them sell anything, other than to be part of something bigger. And these folks have been doing this for some of them more than 10 years with our program. And Zimpro notably with a focus on lameness, most recently Saputo and Dean Foods Foundation with a focus on animal welfare, Zoetis, a pharmaceutical company, a huge partnership with PDPW, Professional Dairy Producers of Wisconsin, and others along the way that have really helped us achieve what we've been able to achieve over the years. I think we've raised over $1 million just in small contributions each year. I've got to serve on a national scale, several professional organizations. This is AABP, the American Association of Bovine Practitioners. Has about 5,000 members. I got to be president a number of years ago, and part of that program we got to write standards for a lot of animal welfare topics, castration, dehorning, handling of non-ambulatory cattle, and a number of things that this organization now has a voice and is certainly part of the discussion. More recently, I've worked with a number of organizations, notably National Milk Producers Federation. They have created this dairy farm program. Obviously, with all this concern about animal welfare, we need to hold our farms to a higher standard, and that means assessing farms for animal welfare. And the dairy farm program, Farmers Assuring Responsible Management, is in its third version. I'm a member of their review committee. We've reviewed it 3 times now. Each year it gets a little bit better. We improve it, and it now covers about 90% of the dairy cattle in the US. Impact. Did we do anything with all this stuff? Well, I think we've done quite a lot. I did a cluster analysis of our herds. These were herds above 200 cows, predominantly freestall housed, and we sampled them. We visited these herds. We looked at how they managed the cows and the outcomes, the lameness, the injuries. And again, we saw a high proportion of these dairies using deep loose bedding, 62% sand, a few others with different products. 2-row pen layouts where cows have all that bunk access to eat at the same time. Solid floors with manual manure removal systems, which avoid some of the infectious disease problems that we see. Fans over the resting space in all but 1 or 2 of those herds. Lots of hoof trimming and hoof care, pedicures, and frequent foot bathing. And so the things that we've talked about have been embraced and been implemented on these farms, with the result that we have cows achieving phenomenal milk production, over 90 pounds of milk per cow per day, while achieving lameness prevalence rates that rival the best grazing herds in the world. This is a study done in New Zealand here. And I'd like to point out that these cows generate about twice as much milk as these little grazing cows in New Zealand, with about the same level of risk for lameness. So, yes, there are some advantages and disadvantages to grazing and housing, but we can manage cows in a variety of different environments successfully. But you have to learn how to do it. And if you look along here, there are some places where we're not doing it right. And we need to implement change and motivate change there. And that's why I spend a lot of time in those places too. If we look at the effect of this deep loose bedding again on lameness, even within these incredible herds that are achieving phenomenal performance, we still see that effect of that deep bedding, lower risks of lameness, down to here 11% of cows. That's starting to get to the point where I'm going to rest easy and can retire when we get to 5%. But we also see injuries that again are unacceptable, swollen hocks, swollen knees, and again our deep loose bedding can get these problems down to very low levels of risk, and that's incredibly important for us to go forward. So our herds are adopting those housing and management strategies to limit lameness. Again, rivaling the best dairy industries in the world. What about our transition cow facilities, our fresh cows? This looks at the compliance of our requirements, those things that we asked farms to do, our little blueprint, bunk space, soft beds, resting space, movements of cows, and you can see the adoption rate in 2004 when we surveyed the herd. You can then see the adoption rate in 2015 when we went back and asked the same questions. Now we see a much higher percentage of herds with sufficient bunk space before and after calving. Still work to do here. Although we've seen a phenomenal increase, we still have work to do to get to where we want to be. Very high percentages of herds using deep soft bedding, sufficient resting space, and minimizing movements between groups. So again, our blueprint has been adopted by a large number of dairies with success. And then finally, on the calf front, the adoption of positive pressure tube systems, again, difficult to find a farm that isn't installing one of these or has installed one of these. This was actually a University of Minnesota PhD thesis a couple of years ago. They surveyed automatic feeder barns in the upper Midwest, and when they looked at screening the calves for illness, poor health was associated with fall and winter, high bacterial counts in milk, larger group sizes, and the absence of a positive pressure tube ventilation system. So we can house cows, very high producing cows, in environments that also maintain very high standards of physical well-being. We talked about the SPAR treatment. We made a little video. We worked with Associated Press. We worked with David Tenenbaum out of UW-Media. This got picked up. And one of the conduits was this little HuffPost posting. They talked about cows getting massaged with this little body rubber here, cow brushes, getting misted to cool the cows, refreshing breezes. Dairyland Initiative says the happy, healthy cows make better milk. And this thing got 1.4 million views. So it got read, and it had a remarkable impact. I think it was difficult for people that had a negative opinion of dairy farmers to try to work out why a dairy farmer would buy a cow a brush. What was in it? What is in it for him or her? And it started, I think, for people to question again, oh, okay, perhaps those dairy farmers aren't such bad souls afterwards. After all, they are trying to look after their cows. But I read the comments, and you should probably never read the comments on these things. And the biggest comment was, I'm not sure how I feel about this. Shouldn't cows graze? Shouldn't cows be outside? And I think that's a common question that we all have, because I can take pictures like that and you'll all go, oh, isn't that nice? And the industry does it to itself. We market our products with pictures like this, even though the reality is less than 8% of US dairy herds have cows out pasture. The reality is quite different. And when you ask farmers why they graze cattle, they choose to do so in a favorable climate where grass grows. when it's economically viable to do so, when they're allowed to do so. We have this thing called the DNR. They don't let you graze cows everywhere, okay? We have to deal with water regulations and so on. We graze cattle when we're required to do so. Herds that are organic are required to have a grazing component to their management system. But most people that graze also house. We generally don't graze cows all year. You certainly wouldn't want to do it in Wisconsin winters. And we still have to build facilities to house our cattle. So we don't get away from the housing piece completely anyway. And then I started to think, well, why do we expect cows to graze? Because I would contend that the modern high-producing dairy cow is about as similar to its grazing ancestor, this is the aurochs down here, as a pet dog is to a wolf, its ancestor. And we don't keep our pet dogs in packs and feed them live prey. So why do we expect the modern dairy cow to graze? Just a question. Because when you ask the cow, she's kind of indifferent. This looks at a free choice system. Cows are given a free stall to go in or pasture. And being fickle things, cows choose both. They went inside the barn during the daylight hours, and they went out during the night. They kind of like being outdoors. This is the percentage of time at pasture. They like being outside at nighttime. So maybe cows are what they are, just incredibly versatile creatures that we can manage in a variety of different ways, different circumstances. We can certainly build facilities that don't work, but we actually now know how to build facilities that do work. And we can keep them in those facilities incredibly successfully without a grazing component. And it's my hope that we have grazing herds, but we also have freestall dairies and little tie stall barns. And I like taking my students to all those different varieties of management systems. And that's, I believe, how we should manage our cows. There are benefits of planned pasture access. And even in our progressive, high-yielding, generally confinement housed dairy herds, about 9% now have these outdoor access paddocks. These areas when the sun's shining, when it's not raining, when it's not cold, they can let some of the cows out some of the time. And if you let our farmers do that, there's some benefits to that, to the cow. And I see that being embraced more and more as we go down into the future. Of course, cows like to be outside during the night. So if we're going to try to convince our consumers that we're doing this, we probably ought to put big floodlights out there so that they can see them as they drive past. We've got a problem. In the US, less than 2% of the people produce all the food for the rest of the 98%. And only 14% of the people live in rural communities now. We're commingling around urban centers, and we're disconnected from the essence of farming, of the understanding of what we're doing. And so I live in a state where we do this crazy thing. This is breakfast on the farm. If you haven't done it, you should do it. This is Keller Crest, one of our favorite dairies. Tim Keller was in an earlier picture. That was the calf barn that we come and troubleshoot all the time. But this was dairy breakfast on the barn a few years ago. And this open, honest engagement is something that we have to do. We have to bring people in, show them what we're doing, listen to their concerns, and in many cases probably have to meet them halfway. Have to embrace that and say, okay, I get what you mean. Let's try this. Is this something that you can support? We do a lot of farm tours. We tour facilities that have been remodeled, rebuilt, and the best way to preach that isn't for me to talk about it, it's for the farmer who's done it. There's Ron Abbing there talking to a whole bunch of folks touring these facilities of his experiences, spending about $2 million remodeling his 1,000-cow dairy, and the milk he's achieved, and the production he's achieved, and the health he's achieved as a result of that. So that was my talk. I gave you a little circle through education, research, outreach, the partnerships we've made and the impact we've had. I think we all benefit from getting to know our cows just a little bit better. Hopefully you will now too. And I'll leave you with my team. These are the people that get it done. Courtney, Mario, Chris, Tom, Becky, Terry, and Ken Nordland, who together with myself started it all back in 2010 with the Dairyland Initiative. So I thank you for listening, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Oh, I don't have a microphone to hand around, I'm sorry. It's locked away. So what I'd like to do is request you to just repeat the questions.
Yep.
So that anybody watching
Got it.
the video
Okay.
can hear. Thank you.
If the average farm is 600 cows, is that right?
No, the average we visit, so the question is about the average herd size. The average herd size in Wisconsin is I think it's around about 180 at the moment. But when we're called to farms, when we look at the average herds that we go to visit, it's around 600 cows. So we're tending to visit the larger dairies because maybe they can afford to have us. We charge for that.
I was wondering, could the small family farmer afford so many of these things that you're suggesting?
No, and that's again why the industry, each and every year, that change is occurring. That small family farm can't afford to do some of the things that we can afford to do in larger farms.
Well, and also probably they can't be as efficient either then.
No.
So would that mean that we're putting a small family farmer out of business pretty rapidly?
The small family farm is struggling. Yeah, bigger farms are struggling right now too. So yes, as those farms get bigger, as those cows are taken into those larger facilities, it becomes more difficult for the smaller farm to compete. Yes, that's true.
Are the large factory farms embracing these qualities that help the cows produce more milk? You know, I'm hearing of these huge factory farms now in Wisconsin that have herds way more than 180, way more than 600. Are they taking care of their cows this way? And how do we know in the store when we go to buy milk whether or not that milk is being produced by cows that are being treated well?
So are large farms adopting these things? Absolutely. These are the data is from those. These are not factories. I don't like to use the term factory farm. I think there's a belief that these are there's some kind of consortium of people that are building these facilities. Most of the big dairies in the state of Wisconsin are owned by families. It's maybe not one family anymore. The way those farmers survive is 2 or 3 families come together and they bring and merge their cows and they build a bigger facility. Those facilities are getting bigger. We've got facilities that have 8,000 cows in the state. If you go to China, there are 40,000 cow farms. 40,000 cows in one place. At some point you look at it and go, that's too many cows. You have to say, that's too many cows. Your idea of a big farm and my idea of a big farm probably isn't the same. I'm pretty comfortable that we can design facilities around 2,000 cows that work incredibly well. And probably the highest performing, highest health status farm in Wisconsin has 2,500 cows. So yes, the answer is those big farms do adopt all the things that we're talking about, because why wouldn't they? If you could keep cows more healthy and more productive, why wouldn't you do that? So yeah, they do tend to do that. There are farms I certainly go to and I think, this is craziness having all these cows in this place. But you go and you look at who's working there, the decisions they're making, and you leave going, actually they're doing a pretty good job for the most part. And so if you actually go look at them, they're not the big scary places that we worry that they might be. There's this horrible term called a CAFO. It sounds like a cat coughing up a hairball. I think we could have come up with a softer, nicer term. It's a concentrated animal feeding operation. It clicks in around 700 or so animals on a farm. CAFOs are the ones that get into newspapers when you see a manure spill or something like that. Those are relatively rare. They have to be cleaned up. Those CAFOs are kept to much higher standards for water quality, for nutrient management plans, disposal of manure, than smaller farms that are often located by the river that don't have such standards. So those larger farms are scrutinized. Are they doing everything that I want them to do? Probably not. Are they doing many things that we want them to do? Most of them are. Most of them are very well run. And most of them are owned by families. Most of them are not just one family, but multiple families trying to make an economically viable model for them to survive. Because, as we've said, it's very hard for you to milk 60 cows and make that work right now. When you're paid $16 per 100 pounds of milk, that's not very much.
Two questions. First one is, you mentioned more CO2 per cow now. I'm assuming that has to do with metabolism, higher metabolism, more milk, more CO2 per cow.
Yes, each cow. So question about the CO2 production. More CO2 per cow, but fewer cows, more milk, so less CO2 per output, per pound of milk.
Which leads me to the question of climate change.
Yeah.
Are you doing any studies on the anticipated impact of that on your herds? I mean, you're talking about heat, for example, and cow comfort.
Yep. Yep. So the impact of the cow on the climate, or the climate on the cow?
Climate on the cow.
The climate on the cow. Yeah, I think that comes down to the impact of heat stress, of warming summers and higher producing cows being more susceptible to that. So different cooling strategies, cooling beds, soaking systems, fast moving air. We haven't got to the point where we're air conditioning agricultural facilities for dairy cows. That's too expensive, but we're close. We're doing virtually everything else. So yes.
Okay. The second question really is the second question. You mentioned the percentage of people who are raising food and the difference between urban and rural populations. There's a professor here, I think her name might be Kramer in political science, who did a book not long ago about the views in the rural parts of the state versus urban parts of the state.
Yeah.
One of the things she noticed was people in rural parts thinking that they weren't getting anything for their tax money.
Yeah.
And kind of a disconnect with the University of Wisconsin and even some legislators you might say aren't real happy with the University of Wisconsin.
Sure.
And yet what you're showing us is using the Wisconsin idea to try to benefit the farmers in this state.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering about outreach and getting that message out there. Is there a disconnect someplace?
Not in our world. I mean, it is our farmers appreciate what we do. They know what they're getting. They have to be reminded of it sometimes, but they've had a remarkable situation in this state, having Professional Dairy Producers of Wisconsin, their own organization, Dairy Business Association, UW Extension, our group in the School of Veterinary Medicine. We've collectively managed to get this dairy industry to a point where few others are. And it would be the envy of the folks in the Northeast or California that do not have anywhere near the type of relationships that they have with their own educational centers. So, yeah, we have to remind them that, your tax dollars do give you quite a lot. We've made you and helped you be the success you are. You've done it yourself for sure, but the university and others around have definitely helped with that. And in a dark moment, they might actually agree to that too. Yeah.
I'm from northeastern Wisconsin, Door County and Kewaunee County areas, and I think that there's a problem with groundwater,
yes,
contaminated wells,
yes,
due to geological formations of thin topsoil and
yeah,
porous bedrock and stuff.
Yeah.
and the increasingly larger size of herds.
Yes.
Are you doing anything to study or address that problem?
I know about it because it's a strange rock formation where there are cracks and they go all the way down to the groundwater. And so that rock formation and where those dairies are puts them at great risk if they have any spills or any manure control issues that can actually get into the groundwater. That's not my field. I'm still a vet trying to deal with cow health, but I know others that are certainly concerned about that.
I'd like to follow up on that. Are there any individuals at the university who are addressing that issue? Trying to understand
I believe so. In cows, I believe the sort of the manure nutrient people are certainly involved in that. Becky Larson would be my first port of call.
Does this also improve the antibiotic use for cows as far as how much is being used and is it cut down on?
Yeah, so you know we've again got a situation where we're obviously concerned about antimicrobial use, antimicrobial resistance. A lot of emphasis on how those antimicrobials are being used on farms. All the stuff we do reduces that. It makes cows healthier, puts them at less risk of udder infections, uterine infections, a lot of the most common reasons, calf pneumonia, the most common reasons why we'll inject an animal or use antibiotics in an animal. Certainly we've got other programs working with the Wisconsin Veterinary Medical Association. We've got a food armor program that together with our state's veterinarians, we have a certification program to help dairy producers use medicines more responsibly. So we're definitely involved in that and realize how important that is. So yes, we're trying to help there too.
I have two short questions. What age do you consider the cow to be too old before they can stop milking that cow? And then second of all, how do you clean the sand bedding in those big ponds?
With machinery, I'll take that one. So we have spinning arms that flatten beds. We have augers that empty the beds out. Once you make a deep bed of sand, you generally just remove the contaminated area and then you add sand generally twice a week, something like that. So it's a little and often kind of approach. The first question related to, remind me again? The age of a cow. Really common question because I think it's common knowledge cows don't last very long in the U.S. dairy industry. Why is that? Why is the average cow only last 2 lactations? And it's really got nothing to do with the health of the animal. If you take 100 cows, we generally make about 90 of them pregnant every year. So we breed them and they get pregnant. And we generally breed them all to a Holstein bull, to an animal that is going to create a dairy replacement, but only half of them are females. We lose a few on the way, there's some mortality, but for every 100 cows that we have, we generally generate 40 replacements that come into the herd at 2 years of age. And the problem we have is US dairymen don't like to sell heifers. They like to bring heifers into their farm, and if your herd size stays constant, 40 times 40 plus 20, you generate a situation where the average cow lasts 2.5 lactations. So it really is a supply and demand piece that we have this pipeline of heifers that comes into our herd. And a cow has to leave if the herd size stays constant. Of course, that doesn't always happen because farmers don't like to cull cows either. So they end up growing the size of the herd, and that's another reason why our herd size keeps increasing. As you become more successful, you want to keep your cows and you build another barn. So survival of our cows, we talk about that a lot in the European focus is 5 lactations. We have to have 5 lactations. The cows have to live longer. But they only breed half their herd to a dairy replacement bull. So for every 100 cows, they end up with 20 heifers. And their turnover rate is 20%. So 20 times 20 times 20 times 20, that's 5 lactations. So it has very little to do with the the type of animal that leaves our herd. It's got everything to do with the supply of animals into our herds. We eat the cows that leave the farm. It's beef. In all but the best restaurants, when you get a steak, you're probably eating a dairy cow. This might come as a shock to a lot of you. The responsibility and the focus is on making sure that that cow that leaves the herd is as healthy as possible. That she isn't lame. She doesn't look like that picture of that cow I showed you. That she doesn't have chronic udder infection or something that compromises the well-being of that animal in her dying moments or late moments in that herd. And that's been a huge improvement over these last few years, because with that reduction in lameness comes an enormous improvement in the quality of the animal that leaves our farm. And we all benefit from that ultimately in the end if we're eating beef. So it isn't really so much about the lifespan. I know farms that have cows that are 18 years old, 20 years old. Most of them get buried on their farms because there's a family connection there in the end. So they can live that long. They can. And in some herds, the average might be 2.5 lactations, but they'll have cows in the 5th, 6th, or 7th lactation, exceptional cows that they keep because they're better than any heifer that they could possibly bring in, and there's an attachment to those animals. So cows can live that long. They generally don't in our system.
How many years is 2.5 lactations?
Cows, a cow for the first time when they're 2 years old, so those cows are 4.5, 5 years old.
So, final question, I'd like to ask where you see yourself, you and your team going with all of this. So you've talked about a number of initiatives. What are the next areas that can be improved, at least within the context of the expertise that you and the partners you've developed have brought to this?
2 areas. I generally work in like 5-year plans, so I'm about year 2 into the ventilation cooling piece. So that's an area where we're going to focus a lot more attention on and try to come up with some novel approaches to help with heat stress management. But the other growth area, and I'm working with a group out of Finland because they have way more experience than we do, is automatic milking systems. We have an enormous problem, as you might expect, getting people to milk cows now. They're not coming from Mexico anymore, and there is not a flood of Americans that want to spend their time milking cows in 12-hour shifts for 6 days a week. So dairy producers are now in a situation that they can't get people to milk. And when you are in a situation where you have cows and you don't have people to milk them, you have to find a way to do that. And the answer is robotic milking systems. And so those have been very widely used in countries like Finland, where more than half the farms have automatic milking systems now. Holland, Denmark. We're starting to see a very rapid growth in automatic milking systems, which carry with them their own set of challenges related to design, which we're starting to get involved in. So that'll be the focus of the next 5 years.
Okay. Please join me in thanking Dr. Cook.
Thanks.